Hello, everybody. This is John Browning on the Building Your Life podcast. We are here today. We've got a special guest, Eric. It's great to have you with us. I really appreciate you taking the time. Eric is one of those people in my life that I met, goodness, what's it been, 2 years ago?
Two and a half years.
And frankly, he's got one of those businesses that we tend not to think about a lot, but it is of vital importance in the economy and the markets. And Eric does a lot of things with mortgages, but more than that, he thinks outside the box. He digs a little bit deeper into some of the things that we really need to think about, not just for the mortgage, right? Not just for the house you want to buy, but beyond that, and building your life around that. How to build your life using the tool that we call money. So it fits right in with the Building Your Life podcast. So, Eric, nobody can introduce you better than you can introduce you. So, I'm going to let you just kind of tell us who you are, what you do, why you do it being the more important thing.
Awesome. Well, John, it's a long overdue meeting between the two of us. Thank you for having me on. So, everybody, my name is Eric Rosberg. I'm with a company called U Mortgage. I'm a mortgage broker here in South Florida. John and I live pretty close to each other. John, we were chatting before you started recording this. About why I did this. And for anybody who can see, I have a picture of the house I grew up in on the wall behind me, and it's in northern Vermont. And John and I were chatting about growing up in that type of environment. It's a lot rougher than we have it here in South Florida, although we do have hurricanes. So from a young age, work ethic, driven in, chopping firewood, cutting down trees, doing the survival. It was a lot more base survival. And then left Vermont. And I'm gonna share my age. I left Vermont in '96, went to college, business management, mathematics. I actually wanted to be an engineer. Originally, I come from a family of engineers. We like to figure things out. We like to put the puzzle pieces together. So that's a
Right.
common theme within my family. But I originally I wanted to own a restaurant. I started working in a restaurant when I was 13, and I'm like, I'm gonna go do business. I'm gonna start a restaurant. And then I found this magical thing, John, called sales. And I realized I had a real knack for it. I started 2002 at a Chevy dealership. And within a year, I think there was in General Motors, there was about 18,000 sales reps. And after the first year, I was in the top 300. And I just had a knack for it. And I enjoyed it, but it wasn't too fulfilling. It was like, it was fun. It was, when we talk about sales, we talk, as my wife says, serving people with solutions. Um, and then as I got older, you start to realize, how can I have an impact? How can I change? What can I do that's fulfilling, that I'm good at, that I can have a true impact on the people around my immediate, myself, my family, and and the people I'm serving. John, there's no better gift than getting to the closing table of somebody who's a first-time home buyer. You're putting them the American dream. They have their house, right? There's the pride. It's a home. So first and foremost, it's a home for their family to grow up in. And then, as you know, because we talk about the financial component, and I say this all the time, and I believe it with every cell in my body. I have never closed on a mortgage and felt like somebody was in a worse position than they were before. It's always, every time I work with somebody. Now there's times that there's one-offs where it doesn't make sense right now for somebody to buy, and we advise that. But every time we've finalized a mortgage, John, it's incredible. So it's a little selfish. It's self gratification, but I know that person's in a better spot. So that's a long-winded version of why I do what I do.
And I think that's why we get along really well, is because we do the same thing, and oftentimes we intersect, right? So a lot of my clients are your clients, vice versa, and it's because it's such a big component, and I'm not an expert in that. You are. I'm more of an expert in the investment side and the structuring of accounts and investments in a way that lowers your tax bill, things like that. And the reason that I do that after working on Wall Street for so long is I began to realize, right? I sort of, after 9/11, and I went through all of that at Morgan Stanley, I began to realize that um, when you're working on Wall Street and you're working for a big company, and there's nothing wrong with those big companies. I learned a lot there. I would never trade that because I couldn't do what I do today without that experience and that learning. But you're really not able to serve your clients as well as you can as if you're independent, and you can show them everything, not just what Morgan Stanley has. And one of the things that we work together about, and this goes to the idea of how do you build your life using mortgage, right? How do you build your financial picture, use that tool we call money to really build out your life? Well, it might be a first time home buyer situation, might be maybe it's an Airbnb and you're trying to figure out how to do that. Maybe it's a HELOC. I mean, tell us a little bit some of the other things that you do as a mortgage broker and mortgage advisor, right?
Yeah, so I think that ties in pretty well to some of the things that you and I have worked on together. And I'll say this: a mortgage is simply a tool or a vehicle. I like to call it a vehicle, either to buy a house or to leverage money, right? And so when you're building a life, you're showing people how they can leverage their money for all sorts of things. I'm not going to get into exactly what you do because I don't know, but I have but it's how do we leverage it? And and John and I have talked, we've worked, and I have the book back there, reverse mortgages. Now, sometimes that's a tool, and it's always everything that I do, and I know that John does, is based around someone's goals. Everybody's goal is a little bit different. So we've leveraged a reverse mortgage to draw out assets, pay off, lower lower expenditures. So remember that client, so their cash flow was so helping through retirement, home equity lines. We've, sometimes taking out, it's not necessarily a bad debt. If you can leverage that debt, whether it's to increase yourself financially, that's the goal.
Yeah. It's just really interesting. I want to go back and revisit that. It's like that reverse mortgage client, a reverse mortgage really worked for them.
Yep.
It was the right solution for their very specific situation. But a lot of people will tell you, right? They'll tell me it's like, oh, reverse mortgages are evil, they're terrible. And I get this with insurance as well. I had somebody you get trolls every once in a while when you post on social media. And I had mentioned something about fees and expenses, and many of us don't really see the fees and expenses that are embedded in things that we think are quote unquote free,
Free.
right? Like your 401k. So many people think, oh, that's a free vehicle. There are a lot of expenses in your 401k that most people don't see. The same thing with if you invest in mutual funds. If you don't dig deeper into some of those things, they've got some pretty high fees that are coming to you before your money comes to you. All sorts of things. You've got to dig a little bit deeper. And this particular gentleman, when I had said something about fees, he said, "Oh, you must sell insurance." Well, the reality is for Guardian Rock and John Browning, it's roughly 5% of my business, and it's a very small percentage of what I do. But many times, an insurance or annuity product is exactly what someone needs, and it's really interesting. Often the fees and charges on that insurance or annuity product are significantly less than what they're paying in, say, their 401k. But somewhere along the line, these things get a bad name or a bad rap, and something is said on YouTube or CNBC, and people just don't dig a little deeper or trust somebody like yourself or myself to show them what is more in their best interest or not. For instance, like with a mortgage, somebody takes out a mortgage, there's a risk that something happens to them. So what do you say about that? I mean, you are would you suggest in some cases, many cases, that they get some life insurance that covers that mortgage in case something happens to them?
If you are a single person with no kids, no family, and you're just buying a house and there's no, that there might be an argument not to have life insurance on that.
Agreed.
You may be able to come up with an argument. Listen, if I die, I die. I have nobody. That would probably be the only argument. I do know that there's a mortgage protection life insurance that's like a term insurance. There's a lot of different things. It's protection for your family. Like John, my wife and stepsons. I have life insurance because if yes, my wife makes makes money, but if I were to pass or have a heart attack, like get an illness, and I wasn't able to work, there's coverage for her. So especially with anybody who, every time I have a family, everybody that's buying a house, I have that conversation. Again, I am not the insurance expert, but we do talk about because it's not, I don't want to be looked at. I don't want to just say, I'm putting you into debt. And I truly believe it's a good debt. Like there's good debts and bad debts.
Right.
But I also don't want that family stuck with that debt. And we want a path for them to get out of that and potentially use that debt to create wealth. It sounds so weird. I'm going to create debt to create wealth. So 100%, I think anybody, again, the one argument, you're a single person, you have no family, like you can kind of say, all right, there's nobody there. It's not a big deal. I do want to back up to what you said about reverse mortgages, because prior to about 2013, it could have been a very bad product. The guidelines weren't there. It was essentially what we call predatory lending. So I understand that bad taste, and if somebody knew somebody that prior to that took out a reverse mortgage, it's a pretty high probability that it wasn't a good deal and it wasn't the right fit.
Yeah.
But with speaking specifically on reverse, there's so much counseling, and it's good. It's all good. There's so much education and counseling that has to be done ahead of time. It's not something you can just be like, here, John, three copies, press hard and sign your
Right. The old carbon copy. Yeah. Dating ourselves again.
To answer your question about life insurance, I mean, it's protecting your family. It's protecting you, protecting your family, protecting your, I'll use the word generational wealth, especially if you have kids and other family. It's the best protection. I mean, I have health insurance. I thought I was invincible for a long time. Then I got a hernia, knee surgery. I was in the hospital with COVID, like some massive things. If I didn't have that insurance, I would be financially in a pickle.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually one of the leading causes of bankruptcy in the United States is health issues. Yeah. And that can affect your mortgage as well, right? It's a big debt. It's a good debt. But you want to build, it's not as simple, right? We all want things to be simple, and there's this concept that I introduced in the book, Build a Life, Not a Portfolio, the idea of oversimplifying or overcomplicating, both are bad. Both of those things are bad, but they're with anything, when you dig into it a little bit more, and I'm sure everybody listening here gets this in their own jobs. There's very few jobs that are as simple as they seem. And we tend to look at, oh, you're a mortgage broker, you give me 3 copies of this and press hard. Right? And that's all there is to it. Well, there's a whole lot more to it, right? And what type of mortgage should you have? And again, I emphasize, should you in particular have? How much should that be based on your income levels, your future potential, and everything else that goes into it? Same thing with the overall financial plan, of which the mortgage is often a very big part. So be careful of the things that seem simple. One of the things that we see all the time is just max out your 401k, because that's simple, or just invest in the S&P 500 index. Yeah, that's simple, and that'll get you somewhere. That'll get you somewhere. But will it get to your best life and where you really want to be, need to be to build your best life? Probably not. Not unless you dig a little deeper, not unless you do a little bit more analysis and really talk to somebody who can structure those things. Your mortgage, your insurance. If you talk to just an insurance guy, or if you talk to just a mortgage guy, or if you talk to just, one guy, well, an insurance guy, it's like a hammer, everything's a nail, right? Often, not always. There's some great insurance guys out there. I can give you some referrals to some, and that they're not that way, and we work together and they make good partners. You are not just a mortgage guy. You specialize there, but you understand, hey, I need to call John and get him involved, or I need to call somebody else and get them involved. And we build this idea of the personal board of directors around our clients. And that's really what sets us apart and really makes us different.
It's not here. I got my paycheck and on to the next, which is very common just in the world in general. John, before we started, we were talking a little bit about, and you had mentioned 401ks, and like people go for the easy, right? The easy button. And in my mind, I think doing a 401k is better than doing nothing. If that's
Absolutely.
the only thing to do. Like do definitely do something. Don't sit on the sidelines and do nothing. But I see your point, like shotgun approach versus rifle approach. Do we want to be just throw stuff out there and try to hit a big target, or do we want to do it targeted? We had talked a little bit about the taxes and stuff, and I think that's something that you get into a little bit, like not the CP, not filing the taxes, but you have different vehicles that can benefit people. You want to just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So when I talk, I'm not a tax advisor. Again, I bring in a tax advisor who that's what they do, and they focus on that. What I help you with is like, okay, just take a mortgage. If you get I forget off the top of my head, but I believe it's 600,000, right? Anything over 600,000, you can't deduct that anymore, right, off your taxes. Am I right on that?
I'd have to check with my CPA.
Again,
See,
we rely on our experts, right? But for the vast majority of mortgages out there, you can deduct your interest expense. So you see, oh, I've got a 5%. I know it's higher than that now, but I've got a 5% interest rate. Well, what is it after taxes? And that's a simple math problem, right? It's I don't know what it is. What is that, 3% after being able to deduct the taxes out of it? So again, good debt versus bad debt. You can't do that with your car, a loan on a car or anything else. So
or your rent payment.
Or your rent payment, exactly. So that's just one of the things with your 401k. You invest in your 401k. If you max that out, as opposed to maybe putting it into some of that investment into an instrument that would be tax-free when you withdraw it in retirement, well, then you're giving more money than you need to Uncle Sam. And maybe you love the United States and you want to give them more taxes, and hey, that's your prerogative. You go right ahead. But I think most of us want to minimize, how much we support Uncle Sam for whatever reason, right? So maybe maxing out your 401k is not the best thing for you. Maybe it is, by the way, and it can be, but often it's really not. So things like that, we talk about that kind of stuff all the time, and often what we're able to do is make as big a difference there as we can with our ability to invest well. So what I'm saying there is that we can make as much difference in your end game and how many assets and how much cash flow you have going into your pocket, not Uncle Sam's pocket at the end of the day in retirement or whatever you're aiming for. We can make as much difference in structuring that to lower your taxes as we can investing really, really well and having great performance. And think about that for a minute. That's a pretty big component and often just completely overlooked by even other investment advisors out there.
Here's a question. I'm going to throw maybe a curveball at you.
Oh boy.
Do you know what Albert Einstein dubbed the eighth wonder of the world? He's much smarter than I am.
Compounded interest. I believe. Interest. Yeah.
Compounding interest.
And it works both ways.
Yep.
Against you and for you.
And for you. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we should wrap this up, and we can do this again because I just talked, as we talked, I was like, we could really drill down on a couple of these other topics. But first of all, and number one, I want people to know how to get in touch with you, because I want people who are listening to the Building Your Life podcast to be able to reach out to somebody that they can feel like they can trust. That's not just going to say, oh yeah, I just want to get you in a mortgage, but rather is going to say, hey, let's get you into the right thing for you. How do they get in touch with you? The easiest way, and we'll have it in the show notes as well, whether you're watching on YouTube or on guardianrockwealth.com or wherever.
So honestly, the easiest way would just be using the Google. You could Google me and it will come up I'm old school, John. I like phone calls. So my cell phone, I still have a New Hampshire area code is 603-817-6004, but a simple Google search to put in my name and my Google page will come up with all my contact information. So, but the cell phone, I like phone calls.
All right. And we're going to have that cell phone number right down there in the bottom on the show notes. And if you are watching on YouTube, you'll see Eric Rosberg. Is it Rosberg or Rosberg?
Rosberg.
Okay. Eric Rosberg is his name. You can Google that. If you're watching on YouTube, you see all that down at the bottom. You see my information down at the bottom of the screen if you're on YouTube as well. Text LIFE to 321-421-5213. You'll get all of my links and all of my information. We do this weekly Building Your Life podcast. We do a morning 5-minute update to cut through all the noise. If you're interested in that, it's audio. You don't have to read anything. You can listen to it on your way to work. And we also do a monthly written blog as well. So we'd love to chat with you, no matter where you are on your financial journey. We're happy to spend a little bit of time with you. And I think that's a big difference between maybe Eric and I and maybe some of the larger firms that'll only talk to you if you got 500 or $1 million or something like that. So Eric, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us on the Building Your Life podcast, and we will see you again on another podcast as well.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
All right. We'll see everybody next week.